Welcome to the first of the fall quarter Lunch and Learns. This will be on the Kamishibai lecture style, which most of you are probably saying Kamishi what? It's very new, very especially to higher education, and so I'm gonna kind of bring you through the what Kamishibai is, and then how we can apply it in our virtual classrooms, and the same would work in residential classrooms. So, Kamishibai. It is the Japanese storytelling art that was popular in the 1930s and kind of phased out in the 1950s. And I'm guessing some people on today could probably guess why this form of storytelling phased out right around the 1950s. Anybody want to venture a guess in the chat box? Something that happened in the 1950s? It was actually popular through the war, through the Depression era, through the war, and made it right to the early 50s. It was very popular with children, and the Kamishibai presenters would bike through the city streets and park their bikes, which on the back of them had these little stages where they made paper art, and they'd tell a whole story to throngs of children who would show up to sit and watch. But then starting in the 1950s, we had a new invention that was called the television, and the television effectively destroyed this ancient art that was really wonderful in the way it works. It still does exist today a little bit, but it's greatly a lost art. And what these Kamishibai artists would do is they'd go around, and the way they'd make money is they'd peddle their comic books and candies and things that kids could buy as they were watching these stories being told. The best part about the Kamishibai stories was the visuals. The visuals were created to enhance what the storyteller was telling, but not to replace it. It was in many ways better than television than that, and better than reading a story to a child, because they had something really visually striking to look at, and that would help tie in what the storyteller was telling. And there are a lot of similarities between this and what we do with PowerPoint in the classroom for lecture. We have a screen where we project images, and we talk about a certain subject, and everybody in the audience is supposed to absorb everything that's said and seen. But there's one big difference between these two that you're seeing on the screen right now. And the big difference is this is how a lot of PowerPoint slides end up looking. And this particular PowerPoint slide is on student distractions. And you can see as the presenter is trying to get through all the information, convey all this knowledge onto students, they're going to spend most of the time trying to read the screen, look at the graphics, interpret it in their brain, and digest all of that, and probably not hear anything that the instructor is saying. Even if this was pared down to bullet points and a chart, they're really going to focus on interpreting the chart, interpreting what the bullet points are meaning, and they're going to lose a lot of what's being said. In the Kamishibai lecture, this same PowerPoint slide would look like this. And the student would be able to just stare at the screen, not have to really interpret much, but the only way they'd find out what is meant by this screen is by listening to what the instructor says. And the instructor would say the exact same thing that's on this screen, saying that some of the major distractions are other coursework, which you see the books in the background, social media, and technology in the classroom, which you see floating above the student's head. And so all the elements are brought into the picture, but the picture does not detract from what the instructor is teaching about. It actually enhances, and it creates a visual imprint on the brain of, I'll remember this on a test because I remember that picture of seeing all those textbooks and seeing the Twitter and Facebook fly over the student's head, so I'm going to remember these things. And so it can be very useful in the right setting. A little background on how education has started to use this is Tara McGowan is credited with really bringing it into the education system. She's published some papers on it. She uses it in the K-12 environment to tell stories and also to teach certain concepts. In higher ed, there's much less information out there. There's much less usage. It's very, very new, very underutilized, and so I thought it would be a good topic because it would be something that a lot of you could really pioneer, especially in our sector. So here are the main rules, regulations, tips on how to put together a Kamishibai lecture. Number one is you want to put it in visual format. Everything should be pictures. There should be no words, no text. The visuals need to be clear, easy to see, bold, stand out, something that's really going to attract the student's eye and also imprint on their mind so they remember it. You want the graphic elements to go all the way to the edge. I know in a lot of PowerPoints, the pictures are framed in the center and you've got a border of PowerPoint background on the screen. But on Kamishibai, the entire screen is the element. And you want the visuals to actually be something. You don't just want them to be clip art and backgrounds and look like they just are there to be a decoration. You want them actually to actively work into exactly what you're talking about. And finally, and probably the hardest thing to do, especially if you're doing a recorded lecture for either online delivery or hybrid delivery, is make it participatory. But it still can be done. What you just need to do is ask some open-ended questions and ask them in a way that students can really ponder it. So say, you're doing a presentation on something in biology, maybe cell mitosis or meiosis, and you want to get to certain points where you can ask them open-ended questions to make them kind of think through the answer without you giving away the answer. And that way they're kind of participating by thinking through processes as you're going, and you not giving them all the answers. Here's an example of how you could use it, and I put it in a business setting. This is a short visual lecture on the changing business office layouts over the past century. I know, really engaging sounding topic. But what the presenter would do in this would bring up, let's start back in the turn of the century, the turn of the 20th century, and they talk about what the office patterns, office trends were like back there, while showing this nice bold image of an actual office setting from the turn of the century. Then you'd move on to mid-century. You'd show a mid-century office and tell how technology changed, how the layout changed, how things got much more open and uniform facing. And you'd move on to the end of the 20th century and show how cubicles had become and computers had dominated the scene. And one big thing about the Kamishibai lecture style is the actual storytelling itself. To make that engaging, really make it interesting, so when they're looking at these pictures, they can actually picture themselves in this situation. And then you'd maybe end it with a picture of a modern day layout of a business office, a small business office, and then you could ask open-ended questions. How are these similar to the first picture you saw? What are some differences? How have we kind of come full circle between the two? And kind of leave it open-ended for them to ponder and draw conclusions from. and maybe even respond to your lecture reviews and with some of their answers. And so you keep it simple like that. You tell stories, you give examples along the way, and it kind of turns out to be less work in preparation and more engaging in delivery. Obviously, this is not meant for every lecture in every course. You're not going to teach people how to solve algebraic equations with Kamishibai. That would be very difficult to do. But in most courses, in most courses, there is probably at least one topic or concept that you cover that could be utilized in this method. And that's what it's really meant to be. It's not meant to be, this is the only way we do lecture and this is what they all should look like. This should really be reserved for things that are maybe a history lesson in a certain topic is great for this. Or if you're giving a real world example or your own personal example of something that's happened, which are excellent things to put in lectures, it could be told via Kamishibai lecture style so that they can really take in your whole story and have some visuals to remember it by. And so now I open the that's a great question, Stephanie. Do I have a resource that I recommend to find these type of pictures? You can really check on any, if you're just going to be using it for your own personal class, just Google image and try to find things. Otherwise, there are a lot of Collective Commons websites that you can go to and find, things that will work that are copyright, fair use, arena sort of images. And also, if you have personal pictures you want to use, you can always use those. If you're talking about things that happen to you in the office place or things, feel free to throw those in. But really, for the example I gave, I just Googled a bunch of old office images from those eras, and I recolored them so that they stood out a little more, since most of the old ones were black and white, and stretched them to fit the entire screen. So really, the sky's the limit. It depends on the topic you're teaching. But now I challenge all of you to see if you can think of a course you teach and a topic or a specific lecture that you could apply these things to. And if you are so brave and you'd like to write it into the chat box so other people could share in your inspiration, feel free to. I'll give 2 minutes of awkward silence while everybody thinks and decides whether they want to participate or not. I could sing for you, or I could just play some Jeopardy music too. Wonderful idea. Yes, practicum course, absolutely. Um, since I'm not sure if this shows up in the recording, I'll reiterate it. Stephanie wrote, in the practicum, I talk about your online presence, and this would be good for that topic. Absolutely, yeah. And in the practicum courses, a lot of things are, I don't know if you want to call them abstract, but it's not like you're teaching fundamentals where you have to go through, memorization and things. So that would be an excellent arena for this type of a style of delivery. Got more typing coming through, so I'm providing more awkward silence. Love it. Reed Perry wrote, in the fitness analysis, it could be used to discuss appropriate and inappropriate assessment techniques. Yeah, health fitness, this would be golden because you can really actually show images of people doing certain movements and motions, and yeah, you can really just discuss it and ask questions of the students, and that's excellent. So yeah, so there's two different programs that have two different uses for it, and really the sky can be endless with the possibilities because there haven't been many rules written on this style of lecture yet. It is so new that you can really be on the ground floor if you want to give it a try in a lecture in doing it. And if anybody does end up doing this, either people on the training today or people watching the recording, I would invite you to send me a link to your recording for your lecture when you're done with it, because it would be great to share these with others if you're up for it, so that other people can kind of learn by seeing other people do it. And I think it could be a huge asset for students who don't want to sit through the same old PowerPoint lectures and want to actually see something different that they'd remember. Ooh, organization, yes. Org behavior, communication, teamwork, these are excellent arenas for this, for sure. So yeah, so that's what I challenge everybody to do. I have already used it in a couple lectures in courses I teach just to kind of get a handle on it so I could present this, and gotten great feedback from students on it. They've really enjoyed seeing much more visually pleasing lectures to go along with some real world stories. So that's all I got for you. I'll hang on for any questions that anybody has, but yeah, keep it short and sweet so you guys can get on with your lunch part of the Lunch and Learn. Thanks for showing up, and I open the floor to questions. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, guys.